You're walking through the streets of Florence in 1450. You pass by this massive stone palace that basically looks like a fortress. But get this, behind those plain walls is a world of gold, marble, and silk that would blow modern billionaires' minds. Let's dive into the absolutely insane homes of Renaissance Europe's ultra-rich. Number 10. The birth of the palace lifestyle. So during the Renaissance, which ran from about 1400 to 1600, Europe's wealthy families weren't messing around. They didn't just build houses. They built massive statements. These places weren't just somewhere to crash, they were literally power moves carved in stone. You had bankers in Florence, kings in France, merchant princes in the Netherlands, and these newly rich nobles in England, all trying to one-up each other with the most jaw-dropping homes you can imagine. The most famous early example? The Palazzo Medici Riccardi in Florence, built between 1444 and 1484. From the outside, this thing looked ready for war. The ground floor had these rough, fortress-like stones called rustication. The middle floor, smoother stones. Top floor, the finest masonry you've ever seen. And this wasn't random at all. It was basically a message carved in stone. We're strong. At the base, refined at the top, and perfectly balanced all the way through. But here's where things get wild. Florence had these super strict laws about flaunting your wealth. So Cosimo de' Medici, the banker who built this place, had to play it cool on the outside. But once you stepped through that door, boom. Rooms, absolutely dripping with gold and fine marbles, tapestries everywhere, gold and silk household ornaments. These rich folks had basically figured out how to hide their wealth in plain sight. The layout of these palaces was genius. You'd walk through this massive door into a courtyard surrounded by columns. Sure, it looked amazing, but it was also super practical. That courtyard pumped light and air right into the building's center. From there, you'd see these grand staircases leading up to the piano nobile, which literally means the noble floor, where the family actually hung out. The ground floor? That was for shops, banks, or storage. And the servants? They got stuck in the attic or basement. Number 9. Venetian palaces built for trade. Venice was playing a completely different game. While Florentine palaces faced regular streets, Venetian palaces faced canals. The main entrance wasn't some boring street door. No way. It was a water door where gondolas could pull right up and unload passengers or cargo. These water entrances opened into these massive halls called porticos that ran the entire length of the building. Want to see how Venice's merchant princes really lived? Check out the Ca' Foscari Palace. Instead of rough stone, they covered their palaces in super thin sheets of colored marble that created patterns like the world's most expensive wallpaper. The Portego wasn't just for show either. It doubled as a reception hall for fancy ceremonies and a business center where million-dollar deals went down. Smaller rooms branched off for those hush-hush private negotiations. The whole building was basically designed around making money. And here's another cool thing about Venetian palaces. They had these external loggias, which were basically fancy balconies with arches. But these weren't just for sipping wine and enjoying canal views. Nope. They were stages where the family could see and be seen during Venice's endless festivals and processions. In a city that ran on trade and diplomacy, even chilling on your balcony was a political power move. Number 8. The revolutionary villa design. By the mid-1500s, wealthy Italians were like, you know what? We need country homes too. But these weren't your typical vacation houses. These were working estates that just happened to look like ancient temples. Enter Andrea Palladio, who basically revolutionized villa design in the Veneto region near Venice. His villas were this perfect mix of drop-dead gorgeous and actually functional, and they still influence architects today. Take Villa Capra, nicknamed La Rotonda. This place has identical temple fronts on all 4 sides, each facing a different killer view. The center? A perfect circle topped by a dome. Now you might think this was just Palladio showing off, but nope. The symmetrical design meant cool breezes could flow through from any direction. Basically nature's air conditioning. Plus, The raised main floor kept everything dry during floods while giving them storage space underneath. But here's where Palladio really showed his genius. He made farms look aristocratic. At Villa Pisani, the central living block connects to these long wings called barches. One wing stored grain, the other housed farm equipment and workers. But from the front? These working buildings looked like fancy extensions of the main house, all unified by matching columns and proportions. The message was crystal clear. Farming could be just as noble as banking or being a warrior. These villas were smart about materials, too. Full stone construction, super expensive. So Palladio often built with brick covered in stucco, only using actual stone for the important stuff like columns and window frames. Clients could pick their luxury level. Want to really impress people? Go all stone. Working with a tighter budget? Brick with stone details still looked absolutely magnificent. Number 7. Inside the Renaissance bedroom. Okay, so Renaissance bedrooms were nothing like what we have today. The camera, as they called it, was this crazy multi-purpose space. It was bedroom, office, dining room, reception room, and get this, even the birthing room all rolled into one. The bed itself? That was the room's centerpiece, often raised up on a platform and surrounded by curtains hanging from this wooden frame called a tester. And these beds weren't cheap. A luxury bed with all its fancy hangings could cost as much as a small farm. The fabrics were basically a geography lesson in wealth. Silk from China, velvet from Genoa, gold thread from Cyprus. Some rich folks even had seasonal curtains. Wool for winter, silk for summer. They literally slept surrounded by evidence of global trade networks. But wait, there's more. The walls were lined with these painted marriage chests called cassoni. These weren't just fancy storage boxes. They were portable wealth. When a girl got married, her cassoni went with her, packed with linens, jewelry, and clothes. The paintings on these chests usually showed scenes from ancient history or mythology, but here's the kicker. They all had messages about how wives and husbands should behave. The walls had their own painted panels called spaliere that continued the stories from the chests. So imagine waking up every day surrounded by scenes of faithful Penelope waiting for Odysseus, or virtuous Lucretia defending her honor. Every single surface was basically screaming lessons about family values and what society expected from you. Number 6. The study as status symbol. Want to know what really showed off Renaissance wealth? A private study or studiolo. These small rooms were like intellectual treasure chambers on steroids. The famous Gubbio Studiolo, now sitting pretty in the Metropolitan Museum, shows exactly what the ultra-rich wanted. The entire room is covered in intarsia, which is this mind-blowing inlaid wood that creates super-realistic images of open cabinets filled with books, scientific instruments, and musical instruments. But this wasn't just fancy decoration. It was basically a three-dimensional LinkedIn profile. Every single object told visitors something about the owner. See that lute? Musical knowledge. That astrolabe. They understood astronomy. Books with visible titles. Check out my literary tastes. The whole room was this complex puzzle of symbols that educated visitors could decode while less educated ones just stood there impressed. Libraries went through a major glow-up too. They transformed from these dark monastic necessities with chained books to secular showpieces. Renaissance libraries had actual windows, comfortable chairs, and gorgeous wooden shelves. The books themselves became part of the decor, bound in tooled leather with gold leaf. Some collectors even had their books bound to match their room's color scheme. Talk about treating knowledge as interior design. Number 5. Textile luxury beyond imagination. Renaissance rooms were absolutely dripping with textiles that cost more than most people's entire houses. Tapestries? Those were the ultimate flex. A good set of tapestries cost way more than paintings by famous artists. But they weren't just for show. They provided insulation, decoration, and portable wealth all at once. When rich families traveled between their various houses, the tapestries went with them, instantly transforming cold stone walls into warm, decorated spaces. The wealthy literally competed to own the newest tapestry designs from Brussels or Arras. Popular subjects included Alexander the Great kicking butt, the Trojan War, or these elaborate gardens filled with mythical beasts. Some tapestries had actual gold and silver thread woven in, which made walls literally shine in candlelight. The Medici family? They owned tapestries designed by Raphael himself, basically turning their walls into galleries of textile paintings. Carpets added another layer of crazy luxury, but here's the thing. They didn't put them on floors. Renaissance. Italians thought carpets were way too precious to walk on. Instead, they draped them over tables, chests, and balconies. Most came from Turkey or Persia, making them both ridiculously expensive and exotic. If you look at paintings from this period, you'll see these carpets carefully arranged to show off their patterns, turning regular furniture into art displays. Window treatments showed off the latest glass technology. As glassmakers figured out how to create larger, clearer panes, windows transformed from tiny defensive slits to these light-filled walls. Rich families installed windows with dozens of small panes held in lead frames, each one hand-blown and slightly different. Silk or light wool curtains filtered this expensive daylight, creating these amazing colored atmospheres that shifted throughout the day. Number 4. Gardens as outdoor architecture. Renaissance gardens weren't just planted. They were literally built. Architects designed them with the same crazy mathematical precision as buildings. The garden at Villa Medici in Fiesole shows all the typical elements: terraces carved right out of hillsides, straight paths lined with evergreen hedges, geometric flower beds called parterres, and everywhere the constant sound of water from fountains and channels. But the water features went way beyond simple fountains. At Via d'Este, hundreds of fountains create this incredible water symphony. The avenue of 100 fountains stretches 130 meters, with water shooting from hundreds of small jets, each making a different sound. And get this. The fountain of the organ actually played music using water pressure to push air through pipes. These weren't just pretty decorations, they were engineering marvels that basically showed nature who was boss. The sculpture programs in these gardens told super complex stories. At Pratolino, this giant figure of Apennino, the mountain god, emerged from a pool. But here's the crazy part. Visitors could actually walk inside the statue, climbing stairs to look out through its eyes. The garden at Bomarzo went totally nuts with a sacred wood filled with monster sculptures, creating this wild journey through a fantasy landscape that completely messed with visitors' expectations. Even the plants had meaning. Laurel meant poetry and victory. Cypress symbolized eternity. Orange and lemon trees in huge terracotta pots could be wheeled indoors during winter, showing off wealth through the ability to grow Mediterranean fruits in cold northern climates. Some gardens included these hedge mazes where visitors could get elegantly lost, basically turning confusion into high-class entertainment. Number 3. French Chateau Magnificence. The French took Italian ideas and went absolutely wild with them, making everything bigger, taller, and way more fairy tale-like. After King Charles VIII invaded Italy in 1494, he came back with Italian artists and architects. But instead of just copying Italian palaces, the French created this amazing hybrid style that mixed Renaissance details with Gothic drama. Chateau de Chambord is the perfect example of this mix. The floor plan follows Italian Renaissance logic with symmetrical rooms around a central staircase. But that staircase? It's a double helix where two people can climb at the same time without ever meeting, a design that might have been suggested by Leonardo da Vinci himself. And the roofline? It explodes with towers, chimneys, and dormer windows that look like an entire city floating in the sky. This wasn't Italian restraint. This was French exuberance turned up to 11. Fontainebleau became like this laboratory for French Renaissance style. Francis I hired Italian artists to create rooms that mixed, painted scenes with three-dimensional stucco figures. The Gallery of Francis. I stretches 60 meters, with literally every surface covered in mythological scenes that secretly celebrate the king's achievements. The paintings flow into sculpted frames that flow into carved ceiling beams, creating these total environments where you can't tell where architecture stops and art begins. French Chateau also pioneered the apartment system. Instead of these multi-purpose rooms, they created sequences of specialized spaces: antechamber for waiting, chamber for formal meetings, cabinet for private conversations, and garderobe for getting dressed. Each room had specific furniture and decoration matched to its exact function. This system completely changed palace design across Europe and eventually became the standard for luxury houses everywhere. Number 2. English prodigy houses break the rules. England showed up late to the Renaissance party, but boy, did they make an entrance. These houses earned the name prodigy houses because of their absolutely mind-blowing size and innovation. Between 1570 and 1620, newly rich courtiers built houses that looked like pure fantasy made real. Hardwicke Hall in Derbyshire became famous for having more glass than wall, even earning its own rhyme. Hardwicke Hall, more glass than wall. These houses basically showed off their modernity. Longleat House has so many windows the walls practically disappear. Wollaton Hall sits on a hill looking like a castle, but instead of defensive towers, it has this clear-story hall that rises above the roofline like a giant glass lantern. These weren't fortresses pretending to be houses, they were houses pretending to be magical palaces. The Long Gallery became England's big contribution to Renaissance architecture. These rooms stretched up to 50 meters long but only 6 meters wide. They worked as indoor walking tracks for exercise during England's constant reign, portrait galleries showing off family and royal connections, and social spaces for everything from music performances to secret romantic meetings. The gallery at Hardwicke Hall has windows on 3 sides, creating this elevated promenade with views across all of Derbyshire. English houses also basically invented privacy. While Italian palaces had rooms that all opened into each other, English houses developed corridors so people could move around without walking through everyone else's space. They created specialized rooms like the closet, a small private study, and the still room where the lady of the house made medicines and preserves. This whole separation of public and private spaces changed house design around the world. Number 1. The technology of Renaissance luxury. The richest Renaissance families enjoyed tech that wouldn't become common for literally centuries. Heating went way beyond basic fireplaces. Hippocaust systems, copied from Roman designs, pushed hot air through hollow walls and floors. At the Palazzo del Te in Mantua, the entire building had underfloor heating powered by furnaces in the basement. Talk about luxury. Water systems showed the real wealth gap. While most Europeans were still carrying water from wells in buckets, elite houses had actual pressurized systems. The Medici villas used gravity-fed pipes to bring water from mountain springs. Some houses had multiple water sources, one for drinking, one for cooking, and one for fountains. The Villa Farnese at Caprarola had this thing called a water chain, a carved stone cascade that cooled and aerated water as it flowed to the house. And yes, they had early toilets. The English called them close stools or necessary houses. These weren't just chamber pots either. They were actual seats connected to drainage systems. At Hampton Court Palace, Henry VIII had a toilet that flushed, with water from cisterns above. The waste went into brick-lined pits that servants had to empty regularly. Not exactly pleasant by our standards, but absolutely revolutionary for the time. Even lighting was a wealth flex. While regular people used smoky tallow candles that stank, the wealthy burned beeswax candles that gave this clear, bright light, without any smell. Chandeliers made of brass or silver multiplied this expensive light. Some houses strategically placed mirrors to reflect candlelight, basically doubling the illumination. The really clever ones used oil lamps with glass chimneys. providing steady light that didn't flicker every time someone opened a door. Security got the Renaissance treatment too. Instead of medieval portcullises, these palaces had sophisticated locks with multiple bolts operated by single keys. Some places had early intercom systems using speaking tubes so owners could talk to visitors without opening doors. Strong rooms protected valuables with iron doors and stone walls so thick that even gunpowder couldn't easily break through. These Renaissance houses completely changed how people thought about domestic life. They proved that houses could be comfortable and magnificent at the same time, private yet public, practical but still beautiful. Their influence spread through pattern books and traveling architects until Renaissance ideas popped up in buildings from Poland to Peru. Today, when we picture a grand house with its symmetrical facade, classical columns, and formal gardens, we're basically looking at the legacy of Renaissance innovation. These weren't just houses. They were three-dimensional encyclopedias teaching lessons about power, culture, and the art of living well that still hit home today.